of advanced biohealing, staying on this idea of innovation and technical risk and where we are, a calculation had to be made that the technical risk is coming down. It's manageable, and commercialization is certainly possible. Your company is a great success of that. Maybe tell us how you feel about where we are in this curve of technology innovation in the field of regenerative medicine.
I always tend to be the cold water sometimes on these subjects because I come from the business perspective. You know, I think what I'm seeing is innovation for innovation's sake is not going to work. And it's a convergence of, you know, with a storm hitting the East Coast, I guess it's kind of the storm that's happening where you have these technologies that are, for the most part, expensive to develop, as Jay said, and potentially expensive to commercialize, meshed with this aging population, everybody's living, you know, we all know the story, right? So it becomes much more, and what we're really seeing when we're looking at opportunities is that the business guys are getting involved a lot earlier in really taking these opportunities and really critically evaluating and deciding, is there a business to be had there? And it's not just, can it get to the market and can it help people, but really, can you identify a payback model that as business people, unfortunately, we have to worry about. And I, for the first time in my career, just recently, we were looking at an opportunity that we actually, in our diligence process, ran a full health outcomes, beta on this opportunity, and that was just a diligence exercise. And it's become that important in our mind. About how you identify these technologies that will really add value to the healthcare system, that will either take costs out, as was said, or give such phenomenal patient improvements that a potentially higher price can be justified because of that. And so, as a business guy, not a scientist, I do find it interesting that I'm getting drawn into meetings more often now where I have no idea what the scientists are talking about, but all I know is I got to figure out, is there a business model? And I see that's really gaining momentum, in our opportunities.
So let's talk about that. And, obviously, to create value, you have to have a problem to solve, and I think that's what you're alluding to. But you also have to make sure that it doesn't rely on a miracle to get there. And so, again, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I'd love to get you to talk more. In your view, because you're now looking at these big problems you could potentially solve, it must mean that the technology, the know-how, is getting to be more reliable to get there. Is that true?
Yeah, well, no, and we've had this conversation. It's the issue that I see from a business perspective when I look at these opportunities is the step change that you want to have from where we are to that healing is, just short of a miracle, as you kind of said. Yet the tradition of medical development is incremental for the most part. When I look at Dermograph, it was approved in 2001. And only last year did we realize the true value of it in the acquisition by Shire. So you really are in this situation where you're potentially looking at what I refer to more as a life cycle type approach to these technologies. So do you have the first gen, but you have to be able to think, okay, we're going to launch this first gen version, but there's follow-ons that, from a portfolio perspective, we think can really add value. But it's very challenging. I mean, it is not an easy space to go into and say, how are we going to make this work? And don't even throw in allogeneic versus autologous.
Well, we'll get to that.
Yeah, I mean, that just makes the matrix even more complicated.
Right.
But that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Okay, Jay?
I think from an innovation perspective, as you think about long-term innovation, invariably one thing happens, which is that competitor innovation improves, so that if you're working on a project that you're going to launch in 5-10 years, you're going to launch it into a market where there's tougher competition, more other products to address the need that you're trying to address. And the other thing that usually, but not always happens, is that the value of your product deteriorates. So usually you start out with a pretty optimistic, particularly if you're a small biotech and you're out and you need to raise money, you tend to attract people who really are real believers. And as you get the real data, often there's a decline from that. And so you really have, even if the innovation ultimately is incremental, to ensure that it is, you have to start out, I think, targeting some substantial innovation, particularly if you're dealing in a therapy that's going to have significant costs or safety risks, and particularly extrapolating into what the reimbursement environment is likely to be out 5 or 10 years. The costs, I think, I think if we can get through the hump of getting this industry started, my guess is that the costs will come down. We've seen whether it's recombinant proteins, monoclonal antibodies, whatever, there's a floor, but the ability to do these on standardized platforms and closed systems in mass production and other technological advances in almost every field of new technology has really brought manufacturing costs down, and I think in the longer term we could expect the same with any type of cell therapy, stem cells in particular.
And I would just add, because Jay said a great point, is the innovation that I'm seeing is not just around the science per se, but in this field, the manufacturing innovation is so critical. We look at our manufacturing facility, which is just sitting down the road, which is 12, 13 years old, and fast forward to technologies we're looking at now that are closed systems that can be more pod type things that you can plunk in different parts of the world. That's really critical, because when you do start to look at different technologies that perhaps logistics becomes a big part of it, having a manufacturing process that's more transferable and such is a big deal. And that's where I'm seeing, again, as we do diligence on things, the manufacturing guys are sitting at the table with us, and the logistics guys are sitting at the table, because how are we going to move this stuff around, and how do we make it suitable for a global opportunity?